Back like we never left, week four already of the MLS season. And clearly, this is a highlight matchup on the MLS schedule for the week, a rematch of last year's Eastern Conference final. Evan, appreciate you coming on, giving us a couple of minutes. This Orlando team through the first three, last couple of times I've done this, I'd say, give me a state of the union as to where Orlando is. A lot of goals scored, a lot of goals given up. Is that the simplest way to say, hey, they're about where they should be right now?
Yes and no. In that I think certainly they've scored a lot of goals. I think they're going to keep scoring a lot of goals. If you go back to halfway through last season, from the middle of last season and now, they've scored 49 goals in their last 20 games. So I think this is clearly sustainable. It's something that really, since Martin Ojeda became the starting number 10, they have been a pretty great, if not elite, attacking team. This team has been known for its defense under Oscar Pareja, and that has obviously lacked to start this year. But the issues with their defense last year, when they were struggling to score, there did appear to be structural problems with their offense. It took changing personnel and adjusting things to get where they needed to go. Whereas with this, it is individual errors being made by players that are better than the errors they're making, particularly the goalkeeper, but others as well are making errors that are uncharacteristic of their status. So the hope there is that these are guys that are veteran players that just need to play better. And that once they play themselves into form, a lot of these issues will take care of themselves. Because if you go back, certainly 3 out of the 4 goals in the Philadelphia game were individual errors. Both goals in the New York City game were individual errors. The first goal in the Toronto game was an individual error. So there have been really lots of those issues rather than something that is a little bit deeper within the team, as if they don't have enough talent or there's something wrong with the tactics. I don't think that's it. And Oscar has spoken to this in press conferences as well, that these are grown men and they're just going to have to play their way through it. But the nice thing is they're going to be able to outscore most teams as they try to grow through that pain as well.
Evan, take me through, and again, not looking for you to break any ground. You and I have been doing this together for a long time, but I feel like, from afar, looking from the outside in, Pedro Gallese, you talk about his kind of struggles early in the season. It seems like he goes through one or two of those stretches all during the course of his career here in Major League Soccer, short of maybe when he first came to the league when he was lights out and as good as there was. I felt like last year, even going into the playoffs, it was Orlando could make a run, but they need to make sure Gillespie is going to be in top form. Is it getting to the point where, who's next man up? Or to your point, and Oscar saying, grown man, he's got to figure it out and he's just got to play better?
Yeah, he just turned 35 last week, right? And he's still, holding on to his spot with the Peruvian national team, which is extremely important to him. And, Father Time is undefeated. At the same time, we did see this last year from Pedro. The first few months, he really did struggle and then got it together really after the Copa America. I would say even through the postseason, the goal against the Red Bulls in the conference title game wasn't his fault. Just an incredible ball by John Tolkien. And it was actually probably Orlando's best defensive player, Wilder Cartagena, that got beat on the set piece. So it's one of those things where he's been here and he's been so good for so long that you just sort of have to trust him. Their longtime backup, Mason Steidejar, is not on the roster anymore. He requested a move to fight for playing time and is now at Real Salt Lake challenging for the number one job. So Javier Otero, who's a 22-year-old, he's had a cup of coffee with the Venezuela national team. He's the backup. We'll likely see him next week against DC United. That game is during an international break. Galles is going to be with Peru for World Cup qualifying. So he'll get at least a taste, his first start next week, you would think. And again, there's always competition for these slots. Just a few weeks ago, we saw Dagerdan Thorhaldsen, who's a good above average starting right back in MLS, get supplanted by what the staff felt was a superior option in a 20-year-old in Alex Freeman. So it is very possible that Galese's spot could be under threat if this continues. I just his track record is such that I expect him to pull out of this and continue to be the El Pulpo that we all know and love down here. He's a beloved player by this fan base. He's on the Mount Rushmore of this club through its 10-year MLS history. So he's a guy that the track record is there, that he's going to have a long leash, but certainly not ideal to start the season.
You just mentioned in that answer, speaking of players, Cartagena, a guy that as an opposing broadcaster between him and Aharujo, man, those are two really good sixes. And I feel like that contrast of styles with Red Bull, whether it's Carbajo and Stroud and Edelman, that was kind of the matchup you and I talked about going into the Eastern Conference Final last year. I would have said with Atuesta being signed in the offseason makes that group even deeper from those sixes. Now Atuesta becomes all that much more important. Cartagena gone for the year. Is that a like for like replacement? I mean, listen, every player is different, but it's not as if you're going from here all the way down with a massive level and drop of talent.
Well, it's not like for like in that they're very different players. I think Atuesta is extremely classy as a midfielder, but he's not a six really at all. He's an eight. He's a box to box midfielder. He wants to get on the ball. He wants to crash the box. If you go back and watch the first few games, he's getting involved in the attack. It's a big reason why Orlando is scoring more goals to start this season is because they kind of have an extra body in there with Atuesta, not only an extra body, but an extra creator. You look at his per 90 numbers among midfielders in MLS, he is top of the charts across the board in the creation stats, expected assists, progressive passing, those sorts of numbers. And that's not something Wilder Cartagena really provided at all. He was there to sit back and shield the back line and break up play and destroy and harass and intimidate, which he was among the best in the league at. That's a big loss. Cesar Araujo has had to step in those shoes. Last couple of weeks, I think he's been fantastic. Really played an incredible game against Toronto, where he also had a goal and an assist, in addition to playing a terrific defensive midfield. And he's not there to score goals, but it's certainly nice when he does. But to have him and Atuesta together, they're clearly still working on their chemistry together. That's something that Wielder and Cesar had tremendous, partnership there. But Atuesta being more involved in the attack, I think, is a net benefit for the team. And it's just going to be down to Cesar, who is also playing for a contract. This is his contract year. He's going to have to be that guy to shield the back line. And learning to live without Wielder is probably part of what it has caused them to struggle defensively. But we've seen this team get off to slow starts and figure it out and become one of the best in the league by August, September, pretty much every year. It would not surprise me if that chemistry develops and they take another step forward as we get deeper into the season.
And attack, as you mentioned, off to a good start, scoring a ton of goals. From a standpoint of getting even better, Duncan McGuire back from shoulder surgery could be an option this week. Not sure what his status would be, but when he does come back, now all of a sudden you're looking at a real competition. You just spoke of the competition between guys. You throw McGuire in with Muriel and Enrique, and now all of a sudden you're talking about tons and tons of options for the Orlando coaching staff.
Yeah, look, McGuire was a sub by the end of last season, right? Because Ramiro Enrique took his spot. He scored in six straight games. They couldn't ignore it, and he was good enough to go the rest of the way. Now to start this year, Ramiro's been off to a slow start. Luis Muriel showed up in way better shape, has been phenomenal through three games. He's top five in the league in non-penalty expected goals. He scored a great goal against New York City. He's been extremely dangerous. And so now Luis Muriel seems to have staked a claim to that spot. But Muriel can also play with another forward. So then maybe do you move Martin Ojeda out wide and juice the attack even more? They have options, right? Now Dagger Dan Thorhaldsen, we've seen him sub in as a winger the last couple of games. Now that he's not the starting right back anymore, he's a great player on the ball, can give you another option. And we haven't even mentioned the new DP, Marko Pasalic, has been fantastic. Signed from Croatia. A lot of people kind of poo-pooed the signing because they'd never heard of him and don't watch the Croatian league. And I said, come on, how can you don't know anything about this guy? I didn't know anything about him. And we had to do some research, and it turns out he's a stud. He's not top 10 in the league in expected goals. He scored a brace in his debut, had a great assist for Muriel last weekend. So they've got all three of their DPs firing. Muriel as a ceiling raiser, I think, is a big deal. And then you add McGuire in on top of that. I think this is a team that could score 60, 65 plus this season, which would be club records. It's just about straightening out those defensive individual mistakes. But I think the ceiling on this team is higher than people are giving it credit for. I've seen a lot of, oh, it's another slow start. Well, they've played a Philly team that suddenly looks like a top contender. And then they played on the postage stamp last weekend, which is always an extremely difficult game for them. And now they get the Red Bull press. So even if the Red Bulls win this game, and I have an immense amount of respect for the way Sandro runs that shop, and I think they're going to be absolutely fine. because the talent on this roster is just too good for them not to be in a strong position come September, October.
Fun when these teams match up. Has been going back to 2015. I remember calling the first game of the Citrus Bowl when they played. Now it's developed into a great rivalry, capped off by last year's Eastern Conference Final. Evan, appreciate you coming on, giving us a couple minutes. Look forward to always catching up with you, my friend, and we'll talk soon.
All right, Matt. Thank you so much.